Hello and welcome to episode number 47 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And we finally have finished the regular season, and we know which teams are in and out of the playoffs. It's very exciting.
Yeah, it was a crazy last week. I know we spoke to Jake, Zane, and Anthony last week about what they thought their chances were to get one of those last two playoff spots. And turns out they're going to Zane and Anthony. So we have our 6 teams set. And I'm excited to get the playoffs started, as I'm sure you are, Cam.
Oh, I am too. I'm excited to see Anthony back in the playoffs. EBO one final ride. They'll be the 5 seed. Anthony will be the 6. I'm excited to see Conor in the playoffs for the first time ever. It'll be really fun. It's a fun group and just a really fun Sunday to get us going and get us ready for playoff baseball.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of those individual matchups more, although I think as we predicted, it did come down to that Sunday, and things definitely looked like they might be going one way for a while and ended up a different way. But did you want to start with some of the matchups without implications first, get through those quickly, and then let's head over to the playoff discussion?
Yeah, let's go through. Go quickly through the other ones. And I guess we'll start with mine. Since it ended up to be 5-4-3, which is kind of fun. We don't see very many of those. I believe that was only the third 5-4-3 matchup all season. And I had that winning scoreline against Alex and Zach. And I wasn't really setting my lineup because this matchup didn't mean anything to me. But it was just kind of fun, scoring 58 runs, which still wasn't the most of any team. My base was great. Very concerned. My ERA this week ballooned even higher than it had in the past. It was 6.32. So just hopefully one more week off will just kind of have me reset, and hopefully my starters will start doing better because I'm worried.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'll add to that is Shamanaya looked better this week. Like, this is maybe his first good start on your team, which is a positive development. But Hinge and Ryu left to start today with left forearm soreness. So it doesn't seem like it's major, but that's definitely something to keep an eye out for. But we'll obviously dig into your team more when we do next week's playoff preview. So I don't really have too much more to add here. Other thing I'll say is a nice way for Alex and Zach to end the season with a close loss to a very high-quality team. And I definitely have high hopes for this team in the future with the nucleus that they have built. So congratulations to them on finishing the season strong.
I agree. They played well. Let's talk about the other team that doesn't have to worry about next week, and that is you. You beat Andrew 9-3. This matchup wasn't really close at any point either.
Yeah, I was set in my lineup most of the week, although I intentionally left a couple guys on the IL and they were healthy, just so I could stash some more guys, which is something I'm going to continue through the bye this week. The only real concerns I had one of them was that the OBP still was not quite there, but given my league success in OBP all year, I'm not too worried, although I think this is now the second consecutive down OBP week. The ERA was a bit high, but a lot of that was because Lou Trevino blew up, who's my second problem. After he's been such a high-quality closer for me all season, I think this might be the end of the line for him. He's given up 13 runs in the last 2 innings. Just kind of, I don't know what's happened to him, but he has just clearly lost it. So, taking some of that off, the ERA looks a lot better. And overall, I'm just pretty happy with how my team ended. To only finish the season with 3 losses in the tie was pretty awesome. So I'm ready for the playoffs. And, decent performance by Andrew, especially on the pitching side. So, I don't think either you or I expected him to finish this season with 6 wins. So good for him for kind of outperforming expectations a bit.
Yeah, I agree. Not the best week for Lou Trevino. I think I'd be worried about him, but really not worried about anyone else on your team. And I guess Kyle Hendricks got blown up too. But yeah, great job, Andrew, finishing 10th in the league when we kind of unanimously picked him to be 12th. Having
Yeah,
a solid season for him. 6 wins and a tie out of 21 matchups. That's definitely respectable. He held his own.
absolutely. No, very happy for Andrew and the progress that his team made. There's one more matchup that didn't really have any playoff implications. That was Ruthvik losing to Yuki 7-5. Interestingly, because ESPN is messing up, it says that Yuki had 17 homers last week and only 9 RBIs.
He had 53 is what I'm seeing.
That's
that'd be interesting if he had 9 RBIs.
Yeah, that sounds more right. But I don't really have much to add here. Just shout out though to my hot take before the season that Yuki would finish with one of the worst 2 records in the league, because that came true. Yuki finished with the second worst record in the league. So that is the first hot take that's correct on the sheet, unless we're counting whoever decided that Andrew just putting, quote, Nomar Mazara on the sheet was a correct hot take.
I mean, is that incorrect though? Nomar Mazara?
He's not good. You know what? I guess it deserves to be a correct hot take because Andrew is rostered in the entire time. But we'll have to go through some of these hot takes sometime because there's some interesting ones in here. So much might become true, actually.
Yeah. As for this matchup, though, it's weird. Very weird to see Yuki having a great offensive week and just a terrible pitching week. Maybe not what we expected from him before the season, but maybe a little bit of what we've seen from his team throughout the year. Some good offense. Even Jamer Candelario had one of the best weeks for his team, and just a little surprising. And this matchup didn't really matter. And Ruthvik now finishes the year 7-12-2 after that playoff appearance last year.
Yeah, definitely a bummer for him. I think this is probably to be expected. Like over the last couple of weeks, I think he knew that this team wasn't really going anywhere, but I'm sure he can't be happy with the end result overall. I do think they bounce back next year, but I think it largely depends on some of the moves that they make in the offseason. I think this team definitely needs to acquire like 2 or 3 more bats at least to really contend next year. Especially with the way some of these other teams are really on the rise and are building more complete teams. But yeah, I don't really have much else to say in this matchup. Congratulations to both teams for finishing their season. Do you want to move on to the relevant matchups?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about one that was only a tiny bit relevant. And that was Erik beating the Flex and Bellies 6-4-2, which was really a lot closer than it should have been. The Bellies, they played well, actually. They had a great ERA and whip, 265 and 106. They had the best on base this week at 377. The Bellies actually had more quality starts than Erik, which is surprising. And this is a matchup that had Conor won his matchup, Erik would have needed to win in order to not drop to the 4 seed. So this matchup did a little bit affect the seeding, and it ended up being really close to affecting the seeding.
Yeah, good for Daniel, Alex, and Greg for keeping it close. I mean, I think all across the board, their team played really well. They just, Erik's offense is just simply a little bit better. And for Erik, this is a pretty solid showing going into the first round of the playoffs. So his team was able to keep up that momentum.
Yeah, I agree. And he's going to have to face Anthony in the first round next week, and he'll have to have his A game. He didn't play amazingly this week, but he played certainly well enough. And yeah, gotta keep up the momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. And as he's shown time in and time again, he seems to be able to put together some sort of winning formula. So I'm not particularly worried about him continuing his strong stretch. But anything else here, or do we want to talk about the two big matchups from last week?
Let's talk about the big ones. And I guess first, let's go into the one between EBO and Bo the Flow, in which the winner of this matchup was guaranteed the 5 seed, and the loser would still have a shot at the playoffs had Anthony not won. And as it turned out, EBO won 7-4-1. And this matchup, kind of a little disappointing that it didn't come down to the end, but it was still an exciting one.
Yeah, it was still close throughout. I think you could have argued maybe there was slight drama as to whether EBO hit the innings or the innings limit for ERA and WHIP, which I think we knew all along they were going to hit. But I think it took them up until late Saturday or in Sunday to actually hit it, and that would have been the only way they would have lost. I think this is an example of their strategy just working perfectly, because they had a .73 ERA and a .73 WHIP. And pretty much every week this season, but when EBO played Conor, or week 2, ironically, that would have been a winning ERA and WHIP. Had 6 holds. The 4 saves were a little low, admittedly, but the offense played really well. 18 homers, 45 ribbies, 5 stolen bases, 63 runs. So I think it all just came together for them in a way that it needed to, and EBO was able to pull out a victory.
Yeah, and I guess I'd hesitate to call it perfect since they didn't win saves, and the on base percentage was only .325. So I would like to see a little more out of them there. But they did. I mean, that ERA .073 was the second best ERA we've ever seen in this league.
Yeah.
So just absolutely remarkable. And 63 runs was really close to the record too. So they had really superlative week in a couple ways. And overall, I mean, it was good enough to win and put them in the playoffs after a season that looked kind of lost really early on.
Yeah, no, good for them for being able to recover so strongly. And shout out to Clayton and Jake too. I mean, they also had a similarly bad start. And we talked last week about how they actually sold pretty early on and kind of bought back in a bit as their team started doing better. The ERA and WHIP weren't there this week. You probably weren't going to beat EBO there. I think some of the bigger disappointment for them has to come down to the homer and ribby numbers. 10-35 aren't really going to cut it, but they were pretty solid across the board elsewhere. I don't really think there's much more they could have done. It's kind of weird looking at a team with 10 wins not making it, but a team with 8 wins making it, even though the ties kind of even it all out. But strong season by them. I expect them to be in the hunt next year, and I think I would actually be surprised if Clayton and Jake don't make the playoffs next year. Just the way they've played to end the season and kind of anticipating them making some upgrades to their team. If they don't make some upgrades to this pitching staff, I'm not as sure. But if they do, as I expect them to, I think they're definitely a contender next year for a top, for maybe like the 3rd or 4th seed.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not going to say I'd be surprised if they miss the playoffs, but I think this team is only going to get better. They traded away Mackenzie Gore and Marco Luciano, and they still missed the playoffs. Does that feel like a waste to you?
I mean, if you're only looking at those 2 players, then yes. But if you're looking at the larger context of the moves that they made, so, like, for example, if they had kept Lance Lynn and Zach Greinke and traded away Luciano and Gore and not made the playoffs, yeah, I think that's a loss. But the fact that they made some moves to step back early on and then trade Gore and Luciano, kind of makes it a little bit harder, in my opinion, to make that determination, because instead of them improving from a baseline, they went down and then tried to go back up a bit. And I also think the pieces that they got for Gore Luciano, so Manny Machado, Zach Gallen, Jose Abreu, I think were the main three pieces they got, could all contribute in future seasons. So I think if we're seeing them making a couple of first-round exits over the next few years, and then Abreu leaves and Gallen doesn't pan out, and Machado starts declining, yes, then I think it's a disappointment. But it's hard to judge this off of half a season of the guys that they got back in return.
That's true, and I guess those guys aren't exactly rentals. They'll have them for a while. We'll just have to see what Luciano turns into, because he seems like a stud. And Mackenzie Gore, I know he's had a rough year, but we'll have to see about him as well.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing I'll say too is that he traded Gore pretty late, so getting Gallen and Abreu, I think he only had him for the last 2.5 weeks of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's maybe 3 or 4 starts for Gallen at most, and a handful of plate appearances for Abreu relative to what he's done all season. So.
Yes, I mean, having those guys longer would have helped the team.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. But yeah, anything else here or?
No, you're ready to dive into the last matchup that ended up deciding the fate of a couple teams.
Yeah, let's do it. So as we laid out last week, both EBO and Clayton and Jake could have made the playoffs regardless of the result if Anthony had lost. And for a while, it looked like Anthony was going to lose. I think as of about 6 o'clock or so yesterday, Anthony was in line for a loss.
For most of the week, Anthony was winning too. It was just kind of the early matchups on Sunday that kind of made it look more in Conor's favor.
Yeah, and so Anthony needed a Taylor Hearn quality start, which he got, but then he needed a couple other things to happen. Either he needed to take over in strikeouts, which he only lost by 74-71, or among the other close categories were doubles. And also stolen bases, which kudos to Conor. Conor got 3 stolen bases yesterday, which propelled him into a tie there, which is, I think, part of what made it trickier. And Anthony was able to get doubles from Kyle Seager and then Lamont Wade Jr. to secure a 6-4-2 win over Conor, to give Anthony the 6th seed and to lock up the 4 seed for Conor. And as we mentioned earlier, had Conor won, Conor would have been the 3 seed, but instead, Anthony pulled out the W. I have to say, this might be the most impressive offensive week I've seen from Anthony maybe all season.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, a 361 on base. He stole 6 bases. He was great in all 6 hitting categories. I mean, maybe doubles could have been a little higher, but 15 is nothing to sneeze at. And I guess the pitching did not live up to that, but he did enough there. And yeah, I mean, if his team hits like this in the first round of the playoffs, I think he can beat EBO.
I think you mean Erik.
Oh yeah, he can beat Erik. True, because he's the 6.
Yeah, I don't know how the next round's going to go. I mean, I definitely think Anthony has a shot. I'm not going to discount that at all. And I do think he just played really well this week. His team needed to ball out. They've been struggling, and they've balled out. And if they could keep up this momentum, good things are going to happen. I guess they balled out from a hitting perspective, not as much from a pitching perspective. But Anthony's team has been relatively solid pitching all year. The hitting has kind of been more of where they've struggled a bit. So if they didn't get the hitting back on track, I'm not necessarily worried that they had a down week pitching. But as for Conor's team, I mean, I feel like you and I talked about this at the beginning of the week. Conor had like a really low OBP, like to start out the week, even lower than this 306. It was in the 200s. And kind of based on that, I was pretty sure that he was going to lose, and it looked that way most of the week. He ended up losing. This is kind of what I've been saying about Conor all year, where he has his moments in some of these categories, but I don't feel like he's been particularly consistent. And this didn't feel like a consistent week for me at all. And I'm not saying that this necessarily worries me for next week against EBO, because anything can happen. But it's definitely going to be harder for them, or for Conor, if he can't, find a little bit more consistency.
I agree. Yeah, Conor definitely needs to be more consistent, because the bats were just not good at all this week. What was his, after 2 days, the on-base percentage was like 250?
It might have even been lower. It might have been like 230 something.
Yeah, he's got to be more consistent than that for sure. But I mean, both of these teams before the season would have just been really happy with a first round playoff exit. That would have been maybe one of the best case scenarios anyway, considering they were both kind of looking at that like 8-9 range. We were predicting them. You had Anthony even like lower than that. But yeah, it's they got to do better to go far in the playoffs, but I think they should be happy with making the playoffs. This is a successful season for both of them.
Absolutely. I'm trying to see here for a second about my preseason playoff rankings. If I wrote them down, or if they're somewhere in this chat, but I don't think I have them. But yeah, I definitely did not have either of them listed as a playoff team. So good for them. I'm happy for both of them, and hopefully for their sakes, they are able to have successful weeks next week.
Absolutely. And yeah, so that was the regular season. Pretty impressive job by everyone. One of the most exciting regular seasons at all, and the first regular season in the podcast era. So it was just a ton of fun to cover and watch every team play every week.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a lot of fun. I enjoy doing these podcasts every week. It's hard to believe that we've already done 47 of these, with a good chunk of them coming during the season. And now I'm pretty excited to actually do the playoff ones, because I feel like we're going to go really in depth on some of these matchups and examining them in a way that we really have not gotten the opportunity to do during the regular season, just because there's 6 matchups to talk about from the week that just happened, and then 6 matchups that are about to happen. I don't think we've seriously gone in depth previewing a matchup since we previewed the week 1 matchups before the season started.
Yeah, we really haven't. We did a lot more previewing week 1 than we have any other week. But I'm excited to kind of dig in, talk about who's got 2-star weeks, and who's got the edge in these matchups based on just injuries and talent and just momentum and everything going in, and just it's the playoffs. That's great.
Yeah, always an exciting time, and now we have I guess we had some winner in situations last week, but now this is it. If you lose, you're done. And 6 team seasons have already finished. 2 more team seasons are going to finish this week, and I'll be curious to see who they are. Which matchup do you want to start out previewing here? Erik and Anthony or Conor v. EBO?
Let's do Erik v. Anthony, the 3v6 matchup. I think that's a good place to start.
Good call. Always nice to start with the higher seed. This is going to be an interesting one. Erik has a 2-start week from Scherzer and a 2-start week from Chris Sale. Anthony looks like he has a 2-start week from Jamison Tyone, who's been fantastic the second half of the season for the Yankees, although he has struggled a bit in back-to-back starts. 6 earned and 4 2/3 against the Angels, 5 earned and 3 2/3 against the A's. So it kind of seems like, you're getting 2 very strong 2-start weeks from them at first glance. Doesn't look like Anthony's anybody starting tomorrow or on Tuesday, which would give the opportunity for another 2-start. What do you think of those 2-start pitchers? Who do you think has the edge between Erik with Scherzer and Cole and Anthony with Taillon and Gausman?
That's tough. Scherzer and Sale are definitely a great combo, but I'm not convinced that Sale is going to be great this year. And just looking at us recording this Monday, Sale pitched 3 2/3, allowed 10 hits, and he was lucky to only allow 1 earned run. He may have allowed a few unearned runs.
He did. I think that number is closer to like 5 or 4.
Yeah, so very lucky to escape with only 1 earned run, but just did not pitch super well. And Anthony already got 2 quality starts out of it, and they didn't, and they both gave up 3 runs in 7 innings, but they've already got that behind them. And Gausman's quality start was at Coors Field. So really, I mean, the toughest start of the week behind him. And I think Anthony's already got just kind of the first start he did better out of those 2 guys. And I guess I'd be more confident in his team.
Yeah, I think so too. I definitely like the way Anthony's pitchers went today. That being said, we can't ignore the Max Scherzer went 8 shutout innings with 13 strikeouts against the Cardinals, and Erik only gave up 1 earned run on Monday. Erik is a .66 ERA, but a pretty high whip thanks to Sale 1.24, whereas Anthony is a 3.60 ERA, but a .73 whip. Looking at some of the other starting pitching matchups they have for the rest of the week, Erik doesn't have anybody going on Wednesday. He has Huascar going on Thursday against the Nationals, which is a matchup I like, and also has been pretty solid. I don't think he's going to do much more than have a ceiling much more than throwing 6 innings, 3 earned. Maybe he throws maybe he gives up like 2 earned or something like that. But I feel like I don't feel like there's a particularly high ceiling for what he could do here, like a Scherzer. He does have a tough pitching matchup on Friday. Yeah, he gets Joe Musgrove, which is good, but that game is at the Dodgers. The last time he pitched against the Dodgers was June 23rd. He gave up 1 earned, 2 hits, 2 walks, 5 Ks in 6 innings. Although that game was at home. But Musgrove has been pretty solid lately. Other than giving up 6 earned to Arizona on August 14th, he hasn't given up more than 2 earned runs in a start since July 18th at Washington pre them getting rid of everybody at the deadline. Saturday, Scherzer against the Padres. So that's not easy. Scherzer can dominate everyone, including the last time he pitched against the Padres, 7 2/3, 2 hits, 1 walk, and 10 Ks. Although when he was with the Nationals, he had back-to-back starts against the Padres on the 8th and the 18th of July. First one was 3 2/3, 7 earned, 5 hits, 7 Ks, 1 walk. And the second one was 7 innings, 8 Ks, and 3 walks, but he gave up 4 earned runs and 4 hits. It also has Corbin Burnes going against Cleveland, Dylan Cease going against Boston, and Shohei Ohtani pitching against Houston. So only one of those matchups are really favorable. I think that's the Corbin Burnes at Cleveland matchup. And then on Sunday, he has Chris Sale going against his former team, the White Sox. How do you, and I'm sure Erik might stream, but how do you feel about that group of starts for Erik?
Yeah, it's maybe not the most favorable set of matchups, but I think I'm still pretty confident in his group of pitchers. Certainly more confident than guys like Corey Kluber or Charlie Morton per se, although they've both been good. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I think Erik will have more volume than Anthony too. And I don't even know if I suspect he'll need to stream a guy.
I don't think so either with some of the high end quality, but the only thing I caution is there's a lot of big names here, but the matchups are equally as important. And I wonder if some of these pitchers might struggle with some of these big name matchups, and perhaps that leads to a bit of an inflated ERA or WHIP, i.e., what Chris Sale did today, giving up 10 hits, even though he only gave up the 1 earned run.
That's true.
Yeah. So I think that's something to watch out for. As for Anthony, nobody on Tuesday. Wednesday, he has Evaldi going against his former team in Tampa. That game's in Boston. And then Alek Manoah going against the Yankees in Yankee Stadium. Thursday, nobody. Friday, he has Corey Kluber going against the Mets in at the stadium, and then Trevor Rogers going against Atlanta in Atlanta. Saturday, he has Tyone against the Mets and Charlie Morton against the Marlins. And Sunday, he has Gausman going against the Cubs. So this is a lot of AL East and NL East divisional matchups, with the exception of the Gausman second start this week. Anthony is probably going to have to get more quality or more quantity to get through this week, just given the sheer number of pitchers Erik has. But how are you feeling about Anthony's pitchers, given their matchups?
I'm not the most confident, honestly. I think I really would have liked for him to have a good matchup for Alek Manoah, because he's just been one of his better pitchers and more reliable young guys over the course of the season. I know he didn't pitch super well his last start, but before that he was dealing. So having him go to Yankee Stadium may not be the matchup that Anthony wants. And Trevor Rogers too. His matchup with Atlanta is a little better, but also he's only made one start since the end of July, and it was an abbreviated one that didn't go super well. So I'm not expecting him to go long enough for a quality start. He actually, even before being shut down for a month, wasn't going that long for a little while. So I think Erik has the advantage in terms of pitching matchups.
Yeah, I guess in defense of Rogers, he missed August due to a family emergency, not an injury. And he did throw 83 pitches in his start on September 4th. So I don't like to think that he should be able to throw like anywhere between 90 and 100 in his next start. Although I think you're right. He has now pitched 6 innings in a start since June 15th. So expecting him to go deep enough to throw a quality start is probably a bit questionable. As for Manoah, he does have some good starts against good teams. On August 23rd against the White Sox, 6 innings, 1 earned ball. Against the Red Sox on August 6th, 5 innings, 2 earned ball. Another start against Boston was 6 innings, 1 earned on June 14th. And the only time in between late May and now that he started against the Yankees, 6 shutout innings. That being said, he is coming off a rough start against Oakland where he gave up 6 earned. So I am somewhat concerned about this matchup, but I don't necessarily think that it's like a deal breaker for him or like he's not going to pitch well because of the matchup. But I think you're right. I'm definitely concerned. I just generally don't like all these divisional matchups because even when a team is not as good as another one, I feel like they know so much about each other. Where it makes it a bit harder for that pitcher. So I'm not really loving that. Although I do think Morton versus Miami is a good matchup. And you didn't mention Kluber, but Kluber's gone 4 innings and 3 2/3 innings since he's come back, threw 78 pitches in his last start. I don't think he's necessarily stretched out. And he hasn't looked particularly impressive since coming back. So I think Anthony's going to have to stream if he wants any chance of winning the starting pitching categories. Maybe he ends up getting a couple good starts at the beginning of the week and he just kind of plays more for the ratios and getting some saves and holds. As we've discussed here before, Erik's team is not really built to get saves and holds. And I feel like that's an opportunity for Anthony to really take advantage, where if he's willing to concede that Erik is going to win Ks and quality starts, there's no reason he can't sweep the other 4 categories if he, plays his cards right, streams some relievers strategically, maybe benches someone like Corey Kluber, and maybe not go full EBO, but like doing enough of it where he could comfortably win the ratios and the bullpen categories. Because again, I don't even think the threshold for him to win those bullpen categories is that high. And if you're looking at Erik's roster right now, he has, 5 relievers right now, or 7 relievers. That's more than I thought. But other than Devin Williams, I don't think any of them are particularly like big names that I really look at and I'm like, oh, like this is the type of guy who I think is going to get a bunch of holds, who's really going to be able to carry Erik's team there.
Yeah, well, Erik really added a bunch of guys going into this matchup to try and win some things. Like he added Ryan Stanek on Sunday the 5th. He added Julius Chassin on the 3rd. He added Luis Garcia on the 2nd. Jose Cisnero, he also added on the 2nd. Tim Meza, he's had him for a little longer, but that was only the end of August. Same with Dominic Leone. So he, just within the past 4 days, he had been saving some ad drops to add a bunch of relievers going into this week, so we wouldn't have to waste ad drops on them. So these are all very recent additions specifically for the purpose of maybe trying to flip some categories against Anthony.
Yeah.
Or against me even next week.
Well, I think it would flip holds. He doesn't have a single saves guy in his roster. If I'm Anthony, I'm trying everything in my power to get 2 saves this week, because I can't imagine he's going to need more than 2 saves this week to beat Erik there. But if the choice comes down to streaming more starting pitchers versus streaming more relievers, if I'm Anthony, I might choose a reliever option, because I think you're going to have an easier time finding which relievers to get that might be able to get some holds for him, versus figuring out which starting pitchers are going to pitch well. And also, while I suspect Erik is probably going to do pretty solid in the starting pitching categories, I don't necessarily expect that just because he picked up this group of guys, he's going to have a solid holds week, because holds are just so unpredictable. Where, I could see Erik entering like Friday with like 1 or 2 holds, and it ends up being a very winnable category for Anthony, especially because like I'm pretty sure he has like some like decent holds guys as well. Alex Reyes is no longer the closer, so he might pick up a hold or 2. I think it's David Bednar, who I don't think has necessarily been getting all or any of the save opportunities there in Pittsburgh. I'd have to double check that. Diekman and AJ Minter have both been racking up some holds. So maybe there's a chance here. And
maybe there's a chance. I'm not sure I'm convinced that he has all that great of a chance, but anything can happen on a week-to-week basis.
That great of a chance of winning holds, or just in general?
I guess in general, but but also hold specifically. I think he's got, I don't know. I think he can win holds.
He can if he plays it carefully. I'm just speculating too. It might end up being, we look at it on Thursday, and Anthony's gotten a quality start from every single one of his starting pitchers, and Erik's gotten like 1 quality start out of 5 for whatever reason, and maybe things end up differently. I'm not suggesting that my path that I'm proposing here is a path of least resistance. I just think that given Erik's kind of inability to build a bullpen this year, that might come back to hurt him in the playoffs, and maybe Anthony can sneak that out. And I've been saying this all year about Erik's team, so this is nothing new.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
No, absolutely. Do we want to jump to the next matchup, or was there actually? Let's talk about their hitters before we talk about the next matchup. Because we just talked a lot about their pitching strategy. Erik is always a little weird with the hitters, right? Because he's starting Elias Diaz and Frank Schwindel, Nicky Lopez, Bobby Dahlbeck, Lane Thomas, Yoshi Sasugo. Interestingly, he left a healthy Chris Taylor on the bench today. Although I guess Ohtani and Jared Walsh will get to play their game. That's all right. But just interesting, he generally benched him. Although maybe we'll play Scherzer, that makes sense. So Erik is kind of a mix of stars and scrubs here. You know, he also has Jose Ramirez, Whit Merrifield, Giancarlo Stanton, Yasser Hernandez, Shohei Ohtani. We know how awesome he's been. And I think you and I have talked quite a bit about Anthony's offense the past couple of weeks. There's some solid guys, but there's also been some guys who aren't so hot. Interestingly, he picked up one of the guys Erik cut this week in Jonathan Schoop. And he's got a couple other guys that like Miles Straw, I really like. Kyle Tucker is solid. Mitch Haniger has had a solid season. Kyle Seager, for the most part, has been pretty solid. Jas Chisholm. Joey Wendell's cooled down, but he's been an all-star. He's got Yasmani Grandal. Which of these offenses do you prefer?
That's a tough one. As for Erik's team, you didn't mention him, and we haven't done a Wander Franco checkup since he got called up, but he now has reached base in 36 consecutive games. He's 20 years old. He had a rough first week or two at the plate, but he has just been absolutely everything we could have dreamed of ever since then.
I think
that is going to be great for
Mickey Mantle's record, I think it was, or some big player's record for the most consecutive games on base at the age of 20.
Yeah, I think he tied Mantle, and he passed like Ott and maybe Trout or someone too. But it's always Mickey Mantle and Mel Ott for those categories, and now it's Wander Franco too.
Yeah, I can't believe I forgot to mention him.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I mean, Erik dropped Tommy Pham, which was kind of surprising, because Pham, he hasn't had the best year, and I know some podcasts or some sources are saying that he's cuttable in seasonal formats. I mean, maybe if Erik wants to treat this like a seasonal league, he can cut a guy who maybe isn't going to be the best the rest of the year. But does he really trust him more than Yoshi Susugo, or less than Yoshi Susugo and Lane Thomas? I mean, yeah, sure. Lane Thomas has got a 690 slugging over the last 7 days, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like Tommy Pham is definitely a better long-term play. So Erik does stuff like that all the time. But I'm not super convinced that Anthony has that kind of star power that Erik has anyway. I mean, he had to rely on Kyle Seager and Lamonte Wade Jr. to be his guys to flip the matchups. And I mean, his two best hitters, Mike Trout and Xander Bogaerts, are both still hurt. So I think Erik has the edge.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And I'd even mentioned Bogaerts or Trout. Bogaerts might be back on Thursday. He's on the COVID list, although I think he actually had COVID. So we know how that affects players. It doesn't look like Trout's going to be back anytime soon, or maybe even this season. And I generally think you're right. I mean, Anthony did bring up a good point when he came on last week, and that Erik can be a little bit unpredictable at the offense because he is just about streaming guys who are hot. And maybe if it doesn't work, it could be really bad. But I think Erik has enough of a track record there where, you know, he deserves the benefit of the doubt. I think he's going to make the right moves there. And I think his stars are definitely better than any stars that Anthony is putting out right now, especially with the injuries that he has. We didn't even mention the Ramon Laureano suspension.
That's true.
Yeah, so I think I definitely lean Erik there too. I think with respect to Pham and Scope as well, Erik cutting them. I mean, I think thinking of this as a dynasty league is obviously what we need to do because it's a dynasty league. But at the end of the day, you know, sometimes if you have the opportunity to win a championship, you know, sometimes you have to make moves that you don't necessarily want to do. I remember making some cuts at the end of the season last year on that Saturday and Sunday of the finals, including guys like Alex Colomé and Chris Taylor, who I didn't necessarily want to cut at the time. I thought Colomé had some trade value in the offseason. I had no intention of keeping him. And Chris Taylor, even though I picked him up on free agency, was a guy I liked. And Taylor's ended up having an all-star season, so I kind of regret just cutting him, but Colomé ended up not working out. But I also know the year before that, when I played Erik in the finals, I held on to all my guys. I held on to an injured Yanni Chirinos, a suspended Domingo Herman, an injured Christian Yelich, who was obviously going to hold on to. But at that point, they still did the 40-man rosters in September instead of 28-man rosters. So a lot of teams didn't place their injured players on the IL and ended up losing the championship narrowly 5-6-1. And I wonder if I had been willing to make some of those cuts, maybe I would have gained enough of an advantage to win. I don't think that would have happened. I was playing for kind of a 6-6 game all along, but that's a whole different story. So all of that is to say, I get Erik's decision, and I don't necessarily think that FAM or Scope are guys he's necessarily going to miss for years to come. I think, it's not like for you, for example, you have Kelenic and Alec Bohm that are really struggling. And I don't know if Bohm's back up with the Phillies yet, but let's say he does come back. You're not going to cut Kelenic and Bohm because the long-term potential for them is just so damn high, and their trade value is so damn high, even if you don't necessarily want to keep them. But I don't think that's the case with FAM and Scope. FAM is 33. He had a hot month in June, but the numbers have been down since then. And Scope was kind of the same deal. He had a really hot June, and he just has not been the same player since then. He's been solid, but he's not really providing much in the homer and RBI category, and his OBP is not like elite enough to kind of overcome. So I'm fine with the decision that Erik made. That being said, I wonder if he's maybe a little more willing than some other teams to pull the trigger on cutting guys. And I certainly know after giving up Hosmer and Dylan Moore, which admittedly is basically nothing to go get Tommy Pham, but still making a trade to get Tommy Pham, it was a little surprising to see that he so quickly cut him. And we should note that Tommy Pham was picked up by EBO on Sunday. So he will be relevant for the playoffs, maybe. And actually, one last thing on him, they've been benching him a lot recently anyway. He has not been playing every day. So cutting him might be more justified than Scope at this point, but I see the justification.
Yeah, that's certainly fair. And he's not cutting his top guys that are having a down week or so, but he's still, I would absolutely say he's quicker to cut guys than other teams. And we'll see if this is something that works for him both short term and long term.
Yeah, it's interesting because you and I have talked the last couple of days as of like, if he had your roster, would he be cutting like Adele or Kelenic? And that's definitely an interesting question to think of. I'd like to think that he wouldn't cut those guys for the pursuit of a championship, but who knows?
Knows indeed.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about this matchup, or do you want to move on to the next one?
Let's move on to the next one. We spent a lot of time here on this matchup, and let's go into EBO versus Conor.
So yeah, this is going to be an interesting matchup. I know Conor is the team that EBO said that they would prefer to play. And I think that this is a pretty solid matchup for both teams. I personally, think that EBO's pitching strategy is going to make things really interesting. It's not like the other matchup where we went through each team's starters. I mean, we know Zane has the reliever edge, and we know Conor has the starting pitcher edge. So that's clear. And we could discuss what we think ERA and WHIP are going to come down to, but I'm reasonably confident in saying that Ks and quality starts will be won by Conor, and saves and holds will be won by EBO. Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. In which case, ERA and WHIP comes into play, and I say this knowing that Zane, despite the reliever strategy, doesn't always necessarily have the best ERA and WHIP weeks. Are you particularly concerned about them losing ERA and WHIP this week?
Yeah, I am. I think it could reasonably go either way. Conor just has these weeks where he just posts an absurd ERA and WHIP, and that happens every once in a while. So I think, yeah, that's something that EBO could lose to Conor. And that's something they did lose to Conor when he had his record-breaking week, and I want to say week 2.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too because the two teams with the highest single season or with the best single season ERA and WHIPs this season were Conor in week 2 against EBO, and EBO this past week against Clayton and Jake.
Yeah, the two best ever. It was just really crazy, and both teams had top-notch whips as well those weeks. So I'd love to see both teams under 1 this week.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it'd be really interesting if they could both post weeks with the ERA and WHIP. I'm guessing one of them doesn't. One of them messes it up somehow, but I think those are maybe toss-up categories. But I think the other 4 are reasonably kind of we know who's going to win what. Anything else you want to say about pitching, or do you want to go into the hitting here?
No, I don't think there's really anything to talk about in terms of pitching, because we don't need to dive into the day-to-day kind of pitching matchups in terms of this matchup. But let's dive into the hitting, because if EBO's strategy is supposed to work, they should be dominating hitting based on the assets they received for not having starting pitchers.
Yeah, and I'll say that we are doing this on Monday night, so we do know that Conor is a 462 OBP so far, but only 2 homers and 4 ribbies compared to the 4 homers and 12 RBIs by EBO, yet they only have a 340 OBP. Conor has the edge in stolen bases and doubles, and EBO has the edge in runs. And stolen bases is actually where I want to start out. A lot of what I hear on some of these Fangraphs podcasts talk about one of the stories they like to tell is how Garrett Hampson won some teams' leagues a couple of years ago. And I kind of could see that with Alberto Mondesi. Mondesi had 2 stolen bases today. We know he's a stolen base machine in general. And that's a category that Conor could easily just win just from him alone, let alone some of the other guys. We already saw the effect that Mondesi had on the matchup against Anthony last week, where he almost beat Anthony because of Mondesi. And I wonder if he will be able to kind of use that to his advantage there. Other than that, I think EBO just generally has some of the bigger names guys. They have Semien, who's been doing well, and Paul Goldschmidt's been hitting pretty well lately, and Trey Turner atop that lineup in Los Angeles has been really good. Mookie Betts is back. Nelson Cruz is there. Starlin Marte, interestingly enough, could be EBO's own league winner, because he's been stealing bases at a ridiculous rate lately, and maybe he'll give Mondesi a run for his money. But I'm not necessarily anticipating Conor's offense to be better than EBO's, although I do certainly think it's possible. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible on a week-to-week basis. And to speak specifically of stolen bases, EBO finished second in steals behind only Erik. And after EBO, the gap between second and third is really big. So EBO really does count on winning stolen bases most weeks. And if they can't do that against Conor, then they'll be in a lot of trouble because they're just in terms of some other hitting categories, they're near the top in most of them, I guess. But I mean, a lot of those categories are tighter than stolen bases are. So it really wouldn't take a lot for Conor to flip those, especially if he's already got stolen bases.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely think, that these categories, stolen bases is definitely going to be close. There's going to be a lot of competition between these two teams. And I think that Conor certainly can win with Mondesi and EBO can certainly win with Marte, among others. So that's certainly going to be interesting. And I do generally agree that, anything can happen on either week. Both of these teams have had offenses that have had really good weeks. So I'm not going to discount either of these teams' chances.
Absolutely not.
I do expect this matchup to be closer than the EBO, than the Erik v. Anthony matchup.
I agree. I think there are a lot of ways Conor can win this matchup. And I think, he's definitely got more paths to victory. And especially if he can just keep that ERA and whip low, maybe by benching a starter or two at some point, then he's really, really got a good chance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both of these teams are very beatable on a week-to-week basis, as we've seen. So I don't necessarily know if there's a clear-cut front runner. I think the one thing that we have to mention is, given EBO's proclivity to tie, Conor is the higher seed. So if they do tie, Conor would advance. Which may make it slightly more likely that Conor is going to win, but who knows?
That's true. That is definitely worth mentioning, and it's honestly a big advantage for Conor that it really might come into play.
Oh, absolutely. Honestly, too, if I told you that there was a team that would finish the season with more ties than losses, you would expect him to have been the number one seed, like, by far, right?
Yeah, like I'd expect him to have 3 wins and 3 ties and 2 losses, not 7 and 6.
Exactly. Yeah, the 7 and 6 is just fucking crazy. I mean, we will never see a season like this again in the league. I guarantee that. Mm-hmm. That's just nuts. But oh man.
Yeah, just a weird combination of a bunch of things. But in the end, fifth seed isn't that disastrous for them.
No, honestly, I thought that they might have to settle for the 6th seed and having to play Erik. The fact that EVO has to play Conor, I think, gives them a really real chance of advancing. And I think, as you and I have both said, neither of us necessarily want to play Zane's team just because of how tricky it is to play against them. They're beatable, but it's not the easiest strategy to go against. We've built our teams in a way, at least I know I have, to beat more teams like you and Erik and Clayton and Jake. And while I'm definitely scared about those 3 teams, maybe even more than I'm scared about EBO as a whole, it's just EBO is just so tricky to beat or to play against, where even though I think they might be a little more beatable, it is a little more frustrating and can be a bit more worrisome, because it's not necessarily just about trusting your guys.
Yeah, no, 100%. I totally agree.
No, for sure. Anything else we want to talk about this matchup, or do we want to move on to making our picks?
Yeah, let's make our picks. And do you have the final standings at the end of the regular season?
Yes, let's go through that. You and I both predicted that I would win. Kudos to both of us. We both predicted you would win. I predicted Ruth, Vic, and Nick and Yuki to tie. You predicted Yuki to win, so you made up some ground there. We both picked Erik to win. I picked Conor to win. You picked Anthony to win, so you gained some ground there. I picked EBO to win. You picked EBO and Clayton and Jake to tie. And I was correct there. So I got 1, 2, 3. I was 4-1-1 on the week. You were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5-0-1 on the week.
Wow.
So I finished the regular season at 77, 30, and 19. You finished the regular season at 70, 29, and 27, if I did my math correctly, which it looks like I did correctly.
All right. So how many games behind you am I going into the playoffs?
I think 3.5 or 4. I think it's 3.5, or maybe it's 4. You actually have less losses than me. But I
like EBO.
I have 7 more wins, but 8 fewer losses and 1 more tie. And do you want to make your pick first, or should I go first?
You can go first since I am losing.
All right. So I will pick Erik to beat Anthony, and I'm gonna pick EBO to beat Conor.
All right. So I will also take Erik to beat Anthony. And in hopes of gaining some ground on you, I will pick Conor and Zane to finish tied 6-6, thus giving the win to Conor.
Yeah, that's honestly might be the most likely scenario there. Yeah. Last thing I want to add, now that we've picked this week's matchups, we haven't talked about our teams that much. We are breaking brackets this year, which is not something we've done in previous years. So you could play the 3, 4, or 5 seeds. So that's Erik, Conor, or EBO, and I could play the 4, 5, 6. So that's Conor, EBO, or Anthony. Who do you think you would rather play in the next round? Obviously, we both seem to think it's going to be Erik, but if you had a choice.
Yeah, so I think I'd rather play Conor. I've done really well against his team this year. I beat him twice. I wasn't particularly worried either time. And I think just my team has matched up well against him in the past. And I think his team is just the least spooky of the 3 remaining teams.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. For me, obviously rather Anthony, just because I feel like he's ended the season very poorly. But I also would not be opposed to playing either Conor or EBO. I feel like I match up pretty well against all 3 of these teams. I'm just glad I don't have to play Erik in the second round. And I feel bad for you that you might have to.
Yeah, I would not be happy facing Erik. It's going to be a really hard fought week if it is him who I have to face. Not that it wouldn't be hard fought if I have to face EBO or Conor. It'll be a very serious matchup, of course, but just Erik has never lost a playoff matchup before.
Yeah. No, it's going to be tough. Playing Erik is never easy. And I certainly would not want to play him. He seems to know what he's doing.
Oh, I agree. And yeah, Anthony does not want to play him either. But for his sake, hopefully he can take some categories off him.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say both you and me are rooting for an Anthony win.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Best of luck to the 4 teams that are playing this week. Cam and I will enjoy sitting on the sidelines watching it all unfold. Curious to see who we get to play next week. And is there anything else you want to say before we log off?
No, just that this year we're pushing Erik is going to do the lottery after the playoffs are over. So we'll see then who's going to get that top pick, and maybe it'll be me. I am in the lottery this year. I'm very excited. And if I mean, making the finals and having a top couple pick in the draft would just be an absolute dream if I can do that. Just a perfect season, and hopefully that's what happens, and hopefully it's a fun playoffs as well, and I'm excited to get it started.
I swear to God, if you get like the number 1 overall pick and you win the league, like that's just
that would create enough salt to get rid of the lottery.
Yeah, you would. I think we would permanently be out to target you.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that teams don't really very few teams own their own first round picks anyway, so I'm not really sure the lottery does a ton anyway, but yeah, that would put a target on my back.
It's definitely a conversation to have moving forward.
Yeah. All right. But yeah, thanks for listening again, and best of luck this week to those teams playing.
Yep, best of luck, and we will be back next week, same time, to discuss what happens in the quarters.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you later.
Je suis flégon comme un ballon d'Elior. Chaque jour je m'améliore, je rayonne, je mets la pression comme Steph Curry pendant les playoffs. Tu sais comment je procède, le négro sec va les crosser avant la 4e période. Quand je suis dans l'action, je suis un agent de la CIH. Fais des transactions dans des cabines des CIH. Le jeu qu'ils jouent me saoule, je shoot sous leurs shoes, je maîtrise mes jutsu.
This podcast is good.